All right, so it's sort of an homage to W. Edwards Deming. Let's dive into what I call the 8 deadly diseases of marketing. So, number 1, not being consistent with your marketing efforts. So, if digital marketers had gotten their hands on the Chick-fil-A campaigns from the 90s of the cows, they would have gotten rid of those cows after 2 months. Oh, they're tired of seeing the cows. We should try something else. We should get dogs with sunglasses on them, and let's try that. Let's start A/B testing these things. Another thing I've heard when it comes to this is, our brand is whatever works. Another way to say that is it's marketing by default. You end up with the Homer Simpson car. If you guys don't know what that is, he was brought in to help design a car in one of the episodes, and it was just the ugliest thing in the world that he helped design, and it had like 1 million cup holders in it. All right. Disease number 2, firefighting instead of fireproofing. This is spending all your time focusing on short-term returns and fixing urgent broken things and not moving the ball forward. Don't spend all your time building sandcastles right by the water. Because over time, if you've ever done that before, here comes the waves and they will just wash away everything that you just built. Instead, build Parthenons. Like the Parthenon in Athens. It's this giant old building with a whole bunch of columns in them. These things stand the test of time. And then once you build it, you have it. One column at a time. And then you can move on to the next column. If we're talking about ads, you're building a portfolio of quality ads that people can see over and over again. And so once you have one good ad, you go and make another good ad. Don't keep recreating the ad and trying to dial it into its essence and trying a person in a green shirt and a yellow shirt and maybe speed this up and open with a different image. Keep making new things. Or if we're talking about content, blog posts, videos, whatever, you have all these great ideas to share with people that's not drivel. If you make something good, stand behind it, and then make another thing that's good and stand behind it. And if we're talking about your actual products and your features, if you're building this Parthenon, now you're adding value constantly. Now you're just creating more reasons to buy your products. We keep adding features. All right, number 3, deference. This is letting builders and contractors design your products. You are supposed to be the one giving them the problems, and they are supposed to figure out how to solve them. Otherwise, what you're going to end up with is a very crappy product that was built by default because they didn't have any interesting problems to solve. So there's 2 good stories here. One is Steve Jobs when he was working on the iPod. He wanted it small. It's supposed to fit in your pocket, and it's supposed to have all this tech inside of it. So every time his team would bring him a new prototype, he'd take it and he'd throw it into the fish tank and he'd look at all the bubbles coming. And he'd say, there's still more space. Make it smaller. And they hated him for doing that because he forced them to make it better. The other good story is about the Walkman. Coincidentally, it's another music player story. The Walkman, if anybody here is a little younger and doesn't know what these things are, you put a tape in a machine and hit play, and you can listen to your music on the go. It's the first time they ever did this. It was led by Sony's co-founder. The guy's name was Akio Morita. He had all his engineers, and he brought them around and tell them what he wants to do. And they kept bringing him prototypes with a record button on it. And he said, no, take it out. We're not trying to create this dictation machine. But everybody kept pressuring this guy to put the record button on there because it's just another feature. He stood firm. The whole idea was that he wanted people to listen to music. He didn't want to confuse them by adding these buttons on there. So he stood his ground and launched one of the biggest products ever made, probably until the iPod. So don't let your designers do this. You're the one who's in charge of this. Number 4, delegating your marketing to marketers. These are crucial tasks, and you cannot delegate these big ideas to the digital marketers and the people that you hire. They're not capable and they don't have the resources of creating these big ideas. And they don't even realize that they don't have these resources. You are the only one that can do this. Because if they do it, it's an incomplete thought. Actual marketing is done at the executive level. So you have to set up the pins, and then you can let the marketers knock them down. Because at worst, what you're going to end up with is Frank's Meatballs. All these marketers imposing their silly ideas for no good reason. All these things that you have to do because you're supposed to do them. Well-intended stubbornness. Number 5, managing only what you can measure. There's a famous Peter Drucker quote out there. It said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Well, not only did he not say that, by the way, but he also believed in the things that you cannot measure. So I think at the very least, he may have said something like that, but sarcastically. The takeaway here is do not become a slave to the data. That's what happened in the Vietnam War with the Secretary of State, Robert McNamara, when Kennedy was president. He was obsessed with the body count in Vietnam. If we're killing more of them than they are of us, we're winning. That's what he thought. We'd go ahead and we'd take Hill 937. We'd lose 70 guys. They'd take 700. 10-to-1 kill ratio. That was a success to us. But after that, after we took that hill and fought for days over that hill, they'd just pack up and leave for nothing. We just thought if we killed enough of them, they'd give up. But we didn't realize that they would just keep coming down to the last guy. There's plenty more than what you can measure. Because just because you can measure it, that doesn't mean it matters. Plus, most of the time, you're just measuring easy things that are easy to calculate. The conversion rate on your website. How many visitors visit the website versus how many sales do you get? Just for fun, let's assume that the sales stay the same in these two examples. So what if the number of your visitors goes down? Automatically, if you have fewer visitors but the same number of sales, your conversion rate goes up and you did nothing. Or number 2, let's say you start driving more traffic to the website or cheaper traffic. Your conversion rate goes down, even if you have the same number of sales. So let's assume for a second your sales do increase, but the amount of traffic that is coming to the website is just so much higher. So really, you're increasing your sales, but your conversion rate is still going down. So you see, this metric, and most metrics, by the way, in and of themselves are meaningless. There are just so many layers of nuance and complexity underneath them. So obviously, it's good to measure things, and it's good to measure sales. But if you're looking for growth, sales isn't exactly a metric or a KPI. It's a result. So you got to find things that you can measure, that you can deliberately improve. Don't just manage what you can measure. Number 6, expecting an advertising budget to solve a marketing problem. You need to be working on your marketing problems long before you start thinking about spending money in advertising. Most of the time, though, we don't get brought in until people are ready to start spending money. And of course, they're always behind, and they're always in a rush, and we're always under this looming deadline. The fact is, you can't spend your way out of a problem like this. But if this was before 2022 and you were backed by venture capital, you might think you could. Your investors wanted you to grow at all costs, so you spend with abandon. And you do grow your sales, but you are losing your ass on the bottom line. So they tell you once you hit the tipping point, you're going to reach profitability. So the investors, they keep raising more money on the Series B, Series C, and propping up your value, all to get you to the IPO and dump your bloated carcass onto unsuspecting investors while they recoup their money. But then your stock price drops by about 90% within the first few months on the stock exchange. It's not like that's ever happened before. Number 7, prioritizing testing over quality. This is basically throwing noodles against the wall and seeing if they stick. But what's really happening most of the time is that they're hiding half-assed work behind this facade of testing. This means they don't actually have to stick their necks out at all and stand behind their work. They might mean well, but usually this is what happens. They start with this shoddy workmanship with the full intention of coming back, looking at the learnings and dialing it in, and then making something really great. But they get distracted, and what was supposed to only be your website for a couple of days, or the ads you were only going to spend a couple $100s on, now they're all you have. And you've spent months or maybe even a year or more driving people to this crappy website and spending thousands and thousands of dollars on these ads. Instead, start by making a good bowl of spaghetti. No more throwing noodles against the wall. That's not a marketing strategy. Once you have the bowl, then you can experiment with garlic bread and garnishes and Parmesan cheese on top. Because your customers, they don't know you're testing. This is all they see. And in most cases, this is all they're ever going to see. Number 8, chasing magic bullets. All we need is a new audience. All we need is this new analytics tool. All we need to do is get TikTok up and running. Nobody's doing videos for their ads anymore. We need to get popular meme videos up. Let's try influencers. Let's get this buy one, get one discount. Let's try advertising on a podcast one time. Let's get this famous guy to post an Instagram story about us. It is so tempting to find these shortcuts. But you might as well start working on your perpetual motion machine because there are no more magic bullets. What you need to do is roll up your sleeves and get to work. Thomas Edison said, opportunities are missed by most people because it comes dressed in overalls and looks a whole lot like work.